Palantir, after 17 years going public in a direct listing, and it is a successful one at that, took a few hours to settle on a price. The reference price originated at $7.25. It actually went public at $10 and is now up about 6% on top of that $10. So nice market capitalization for the company, which took 17 years to go public. Let's bring in Bloomberg Businessweek's Max Chafkin to talk to us a little bit more. What is Palantir planning to do with the money it's going to get from the public markets now, Max?
So as Scarlett was saying earlier, I mean, this is not a fundraising event as much as it is a liquidity event for these long-time shareholders, including some of Palantir's founders. The company, its company was founded in 2003. It's raised a ton of money, kind of in the early, venture capital world. It's done some late-stage deals. So I think this is more about getting some liquidity for its employees and for the founders. That said, obviously, having this company go public at a high valuation, which is what we're seeing right now, is definitely going to help it as it looks to get other contracts, as it looks to kind of plan its future, hopefully beyond COVID and if President Trump loses in November, beyond the Trump administration, which are both kind of important things for Palantir.
It's interesting, Max, whenever you kind of look for stories about Palantir, secretive is somewhere in the mix. It is seen to be, because of the nature of its business over time and because it was private, a company that played its cards close to the vest. As a public company, much will change. Is there any risk for investors in there as it goes after new corporate clients and has to open the kimono a little bit?
I think that risk has kind of been overblown, honestly. I mean, Palantir has been very good at cultivating this air of mystery around it. I think it's worked wonders for its ability to recruit and also its ability to kind of bring on corporate clients, because it's really nice when you're, trying to bring a big corporation on board. You say, hey, this is the same technology the CIA uses. Wouldn't you want that? There's a lot of precedent for kind of big government contractors, including software companies that do a lot of business with the government, operating publicly. I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. I mean, we can, you look at their S1 and you see the numbers from the Army. I mean, it's a huge amount of money that's already coming in from the Army. So I wouldn't be especially worried about that. You do wonder how it kind of affects how the company talks about itself, how people think about itself, about Palantir going forward.
It underwent 11 S1 amendments and changed its listing date 3 times. Was there any trepidation about Palantir going public on the part of Peter Thiel and some of the board members potentially, or anything like that, in the sense that, now it is sort of fair game for regulators and for people to examine its businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter Thiel has been, very quiet over the last 6 months or so. I think, I think it's a somewhat uncomfortable moment. President Trump's obviously pretty far down in the polls right now. Peter Thiel is somebody who's very closely associated, with the current administration, and Palantir, has to walk a political dance right now, because on one hand, things have gone very well over the last 3.5 years. On the other hand, they want to do well no matter who is in the White House. The company did all right during the Obama administration. So I think there's going to be a little bit of political caution. That said, in the S1, we did see this kind of, throw down the gauntlet moment from CEO Alex Karp, basically trying to distance Palantir from the, sort of more liberal peers in Silicon Valley. So it's going to be a political dance.
Speaking of the political, board member and former Canadian ambassador got himself in some hot water ethically, and some Canadian politicians in hot water ethically, over some kind of perceived lobbying around data analysis for COVID, all of it in kind of the fast-moving environment of the spring. Bit of a wake-up call, though, that, suddenly you have to start behaving differently as a public company. Is this a business that's ready for prime time? I know we're kind of asking you the same thing in different ways, but to me that was a sign that this is one that could see some stumbles.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely, as you say, there are just tons of pitfalls. Anytime you're talking about government contracts, there's more scrutiny. I mean, Palantir's been around for a long time, and they've had quite a few late-stage investors. It's one of these companies. I don't think they have definitely not been as transparent as something like Uber or WeWork, or there were a bunch of these sort of private companies before Uber went public that were kind of de facto public. Palantir wasn't that far, but this is a company that has a large base of outside investors already, which is one of the reasons they're doing the direct listing. That said, founder control has not always worked really well for some Silicon Valley companies and maybe less well for others. And the fact that there is this kind of very tightly controlled ownership structure around somebody who is sort of powerful, politically polarizing, all that stuff. I mean, that's going to create all sorts of pitfalls, as you say. And again, they're operating in this area where there's tons of scrutiny, and definitely wouldn't expect that to go away. Max,
really briefly, have you any idea who's buying Palantir today? It's up 12% again now from the opening price, that is, as well. Are these hedge fund buys?
I haven't looked at it closely. It's kind of outside my expertise. That said, I mean, when you look at Palantir, in some ways, again, it looks like a consultancy. It looks like a government contractor. On the other hand, in other ways, it looks like some of these software companies that have done extremely well, in 2020. It's sort of COVID, well adapted to COVID. Any company that's selling a virtual product, which in some ways Palantir is, and where you have these sort of big contracts, and you have some advantages around sort of, they already have an in with the government. Maybe they're getting better at selling this. They're going to have some advantages, and I think investors are reacting to that.
All right, Max, thank you for that. Bloomberg's Max Chafkin on Palantir there.